I've decided to marry your sister. So you need to leave this house. This is the best birthday present, isn't it? He's mine now. My 48th birthday. The words my longtime husband and my own blood sister thrust at me with radiant smiles were nothing less than a cruel betrayal. On the cake placed on the table, the letters that read, "Happy Birthday, Madison," looked distorted, as if mocking me. In the silence that felt like time had stopped, I slowly raised my face. The two people in front of me were like spectators eagerly awaiting the despair that was about to begin for me. But they did not yet know. The true playwright of this farce was me. And within just 1 hour, a real surprise awaited when their lives would collapse with a deafening crash. The 6 months leading up to this day had been filled with a false sense of calm. The consulting company I had founded was on track, and although I was busy, I was leading fulfilling days. My only daughter, Sophia, had entered the university of her choice and was shining with vitality. It was a modest but satisfying daily life. Yes, I tried to believe that. It was around that time that I began to sense a coldness in the attitude of my husband, Daniel. In the past, whenever I reported a success at work, he would celebrate as if it were his own. But recently, even when I secured a major contract, all he would say was, "Oh," without even lifting his face from his smartphone. I could feel in my skin that his interest was no longer in me. The turning point was when my sister Olivia began visiting this house with a frequency that was clearly increasing. Wearing a carefree smile, she slipped naturally into our daily lives. "Happy birthday, Madison." Even today, she arrived just past noon carrying a large bouquet of flowers. The sweet and strong fragrance somehow set my nerves on edge. At that time, I still forced a smile and pretended to be pleased. After all, she was my only beloved sister. However, when Daniel returned from work in the evening, the unease in my chest turned into a definite sense of discomfort. He looked surprised to see Olivia and quickly wore a delighted expression like that of a co-conspirator. "Oh, Olivia, you're here." Perfect timing. I still could not measure the meaning of those words. The birthday dinner shared among the three of us was nothing short of bizarre. The roast beef I had prepared with all my heart and the red wine that Daniel loved most were merely set on the table like stage props. The true stars were Daniel and Olivia. They cleverly excluded me from the conversation, delighting in stories that only the two of them knew. Even when I opened my mouth to say something, my words were drowned in the waves of their dialogue, or they would glance at me briefly before returning immediately to their own private world. It was as if I did not exist there at all. I silently carried the tasteless meat to my mouth, as though chewing sand. And after the meal ended, just as I stood up to prepare the cake, Daniel stopped me with a cold voice. "Madison, sit down. I have something important to say." With that voice, I understood everything. Slowly, my husband clasped Olivia's hand and intertwined his fingers with hers as if to flaunt it. And then came the words from the beginning. "I've decided to marry your sister. So you need to leave this house." "Ah, I see." So that was what it was all about. All the unease of the past 6 months had been leading up to this moment. Like puzzle pieces falling into place, the full picture of betrayal was completed before my eyes. Before sadness could rise, a burning rage welled up from deep within me. On my birthday, in my home, my husband and my sister were trying to take everything from me. But they still did not know. They did not know that I was not some fragile woman who would simply end this story as a tragic heroine. From the day when I noticed his suspicious financial dealings 6 months ago, my quiet preparations for retaliation had already begun. The hours they spent in secret meetings were nothing more than a period of meticulous preparation for me to record their sins and deliver judgment. I completely smothered the rising fury beneath a thick mask called composure. I clenched my trembling fingers tightly under the table and drew a deep breath. To explode with emotion would be to fall right into their trap. In my script, a far more dramatic finale was waiting. "All right." The voice I forced out was flatter and colder than even I had expected. At my unexpected response, the two of them exchanged startled looks. Olivia pouted her lips in dissatisfaction. What? That's it? Aren't you going to cry and scream? How boring. At those cruel words, disguised as innocent, something inside me finally snapped with a sharp break. Boring? After trampling on years of marriage and the bond of sisterhood for the sake of your selfish desires, that's the impression you give me? I slowly stood up. Perhaps sensing the instinctive hostility in that quiet motion, Daniel stiffened slightly. I turned my eyes away from them and walked toward the bedroom closet. There, I quietly pulled out the suitcase I had already packed with the bare minimum of belongings. When I returned to the living room, Daniel looked at me with a suspicious gaze. What's with that suitcase? You're well prepared, aren't you? For the first time that day, I smiled from the bottom of my heart. It was a smile born from the depths of rage and despair, cold as ice. Yes, preparation is everything. Risk management is like an occupational hazard for a consultant. Then I placed my hand on the doorknob of the entrance. Just before opening the door, I turned back to the foolish pair with my brightest smile. Daniel, Olivia, thank you for the best birthday ever. As a token of gratitude, I've prepared a gift for you as well. I paused deliberately for a beat before continuing. It should arrive in exactly 1 hour, so the two of you can wait together and look forward to it. Leaving the two of them frozen with their mouths agape, I stepped out of my own home. Just before the door closed, I heard Olivia's voice. A gift? How creepy. The cold air outside eased the blaze in my heart, if only a little. 60 minutes remained until the beginning of the show. The curtain on the most exhilarating performance of my life was about to rise. The cold night air caressed my burning cheeks. Sinking deep into the back seat of a taxi I had hailed, I opened the messaging app on my smartphone. I sent short messages to my only accomplice, my daughter Sophia, and to the director of this plan, Attorney Brown. The curtain has risen. Begin as scheduled in 60 minutes. Immediately, firm confirmations arrived from both of them. Those simple words felt more reassuring than anything else. As I gazed absent-mindedly at the city lights flowing past the taxi window, my mind drifted back to that day 6 months ago, when I first began writing the script for this intricate revenge play. It had all started with something ordinary on an ordinary day. While checking my credit card statement, my eyes caught sight of a large purchase at a jewelry store I had never seen before. The date matched the day Daniel had said, I suddenly have to stay overnight for a business trip, and left the house. I asked him casually, Hey, what's this charge? For a brief moment, his face froze, and then, as if rehearsed, he hurriedly patched it over. Oh, that. I paid up front for a coworker's wedding gift. I'll be reimbursed right away. At that overly fluent lie, a small but sharp thorn pierced my heart. After more than 20 years together, I knew. I knew the slight flicker in his eyes that appeared only when he lied. From that day on, my world quietly began to fade in color. There were more days when my husband came home late, and even on weekends he would leave, saying it was for work obligations. And at the same time, my sister Olivia began visiting our home with increasing frequency, almost as if it had been coordinated. She would sip the tea I brewed and shamelessly say, Daniel seems really exhausted lately. You have to support him properly, Madison. Looking back now, that must have been a clever warning, almost like a declaration of victory directed at me. In hindsight, Daniel's favoritism may have begun from the very start of our marriage. On the night I came home expecting a celebration after winning my first major contract as a consultant, what awaited me was Daniel's indifferent response. Oh, that's good. But that same weekend, when Olivia reported that she had completed a trial cooking class, he exclaimed, That's amazing. Let's celebrate. And made a reservation at an expensive restaurant, making a huge fuss. My hard-won success, the result of staking my life, was treated as less than my sister's first step in a mere hobby. Perhaps it was his unconscious instinct to protect his fragile pride. My success threatened him, while Olivia's trivial daily events reassured him. That distorted dynamic quietly eroded our marriage, and I should have realized it much sooner. My suspicion then turned into a cutting certainty one late night. While I was working in the study, I heard Daniel's hushed voice coming from the living room. The person on the phone was undoubtedly Olivia. I held my breath and pressed my ear against the wall. "That necklace looked great on you." "Don't worry, I made up some excuse for Madison. She's too clueless to notice." The instant I heard those words, it felt as if all the blood in my body was rushing backward. That charge had indeed been for a gift to Olivia. With the money I had earned in the house that was mine, my husband was whispering words of love to my sister. The next day, I contacted Attorney Brown, my close friend since college and a specialist in divorce cases. When I told him the situation, he said in a calm voice, "Madison, this is war. To win, you need perfect evidence and strategy." Those words snapped me back to reality. Yes, this was war. And if it was war, then I had to win. They had to pay a fitting price for their betrayal. That night, I confided everything to Sophia. After silently listening to me, she spoke through her tears with a determined expression. "Mom, let me help too. I will never forgive them." Studying information security at university, Sophia became the most reliable ally I could have asked for. We became quiet accomplices. Our investigation began from there. Sophia pointed out that Daniel's old laptop might still contain recoverable data. Late at night, waiting until Daniel was sound asleep, I crept into the study. Through a video call, Sophia guided me, and together we succeeded in extracting deleted emails and browsing data from his computer. The next day, when Sophia analyzed the data, we were stunned. An overwhelming number of emails exchanged between the two of them had been left vividly intact. In those emails was a meticulous and malicious plan detailing how they intended to rob me of my assets. If we use Madison's company's internal information, we can make money through insider trading. Can't we trick her into transferring the house title to me as if it were a lifetime gift? On her birthday, we'll reveal everything and throw her out without paying alimony. It'll be the greatest show ever. It was a grotesque record of their vile desires, mocking my work, and using my very life as a stepping stone for their own pleasure. The final blow was an email sent by Olivia. "Madison is pathetic, isn't she? Working so desperately to create a paradise for us. I really should thank her, LOL." I felt my strength drain away, surpassing even anger. That email had more than enough power to completely erase the faint hesitation that still lingered in my heart. Attorney Brown looked over the evidence we had gathered and muttered in a voice tinged with anger. "This is horrible, but it's perfect. Drafts of forged property title transfer documents, suspicious records of remittances to offshore shell companies, and chat logs suggesting insider trading. There was no way left for them to escape. From there, we crafted the final plan. The bank, the Securities and Exchange Surveillance Commission, the tax authority, and the police. By leaking information to multiple public institutions simultaneously, their social lives and economic freedom would be severed in an instant. Attorney Brown coordinated with specialists in each field, and a perfect encirclement, with not a single legal loophole, was quietly but steadily constructed. All preparations were completed the day before my birthday. All that was left was to wait calmly for them to pull the trigger on their own guillotine. The taxi slid into the entrance of the luxury hotel in the city center that I had reserved. I handed my suitcase to the bellboy and checked in. When I opened the heavy door to the assigned suite, a glittering night view of New York spread out below me like scattered jewels. The world I thought I had lost still shone this beautifully. I walked to the window and pressed my forehead against the cold glass. Toward the home that was once mine, somewhere in the distance, I whispered quietly, "It's showtime." Then I slipped into a bathrobe from the closet and ordered the finest champagne through room service. It was an elegant aperitif for the revenge show that was about to begin. In the spacious suite, it felt as though only the ticking of a second hand echoed. In reality, the modern clock on the wall was silent, but the beating of my heart marked the time with precision. The golden champagne poured into the glass released delicate bubbles, as if eagerly awaiting the moment of celebration. When I confirmed that the timer on my smartphone had less than 10 minutes remaining, I began a video call with my daughter Sophia, just as planned. On the screen, she appeared holding a large cushion, her expression slightly tense, yet her eyes sparkled with anticipation. "Mom, it's finally time." I smiled back and gently raised the glass in my hand. "Yes, just a little longer until the greatest show begins." For this day, we had anticipated every possible scenario and repeated countless simulations. The timetable crafted by Attorney Brown was a masterpiece, calculated down to the very second. First, the opening salvo would come from the bank. Every account jointly managed by Daniel and Olivia, as well as the shell company accounts into which they had funneled my assets, would all be frozen simultaneously at precisely 8 p.m. It would be the equivalent of cutting off their financial lifeline with a giant pair of scissors. Amid that turmoil, calls from the Securities and Exchange Surveillance Commission and the tax authority would immediately begin ringing their phones one after another. And then, as panic consumed them, the police, the stars of the final act, would arrive at their door. It was a flawless script. The timer dropped below 1 minute. I could see Sophia swallow nervously on the screen. Even I felt my heartbeat quicken slightly. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. At that moment, I closed my eyes and vividly pictured the accursed living room of my former home. By now, the two of them were surely raising their glasses in victory, celebrating in the castle they had just stolen for themselves. And right then, the call that would shatter their false feast must have begun ringing. "Mom, Attorney Brown just contacted me. The bank, Phase 1 is complete." Sophia's excited voice pulled my consciousness back to reality. I slowly opened my eyes and took a sip of champagne. The cold liquid sliding down my throat sharpened my focus even further. I pictured it in my mind. On Daniel's phone screen, a call from a major bank appeared. When he answered suspiciously, an emotionless, businesslike voice would inform him, "Mr. Daniel, we regret to inform you that due to confirmed suspicions of unauthorized fund transfers involving yourself and Ms. Olivia, all related accounts have been fully frozen effective immediately." I could almost see the baccarat glass slipping from his hand, staining the expensive Persian rug with a splash of red wine. "What are you talking about?" he would roar. But the voice on the other end would continue coldly, reading the words as if from a manual. "Mom, the second wave is here." The Securities Commission and the tax authority just moved at the same time. Sophia's voice rose another pitch. While Daniel was still reeling from the call with the bank, Olivia's smartphone would begin to ring. It would be the Securities and Exchange Surveillance Commission, requesting voluntary questioning over suspected insider trading. Almost simultaneously, one of Daniel's other phones would receive a stern warning from the tax authority about undeclared overseas assets. As the flood of information crashed over them, their minds would be pushed past their limits, short-circuiting completely. "What the hell is going on?" "I don't know, you're the one managing everything." That ugly blame game must have already begun. The sandcastle they had built was starting to crumble, collapsing from within under suspicion and distrust. And then Sophia caught her breath. "Mom, the main event has arrived." She spoke while keeping her eyes fixed on the computer screen in front of her. I straightened my posture and focused on the screen as well. It was a live feed from the high-performance network cameras Sophia had installed in advance. The footage showed several black sedans silently pulling up in front of the house. Men in suits stepped out. We knew exactly what kind of warrants they held: a search warrant and arrest warrants. The front door was pounded with heavy knocks. The feed included audio, and we could faintly hear the chaos in the living room. The door opened, and Daniel's stunned face appeared on screen. When the warrant was shown to him, his legs gave out and he collapsed on the spot. The camera captured the inside of the living room. There was Olivia, pale-faced and trembling. Once she grasped the situation, she began screaming like a madwoman. "This is your fault. You promised you'd handle everything better. Shut up. You're the one who pushed me, saying you wanted more money. Their grotesque shouting match played out like a farce, in stark contrast to the calm and methodical movements of the investigators beginning the search. Hearing the commotion, neighbors peeked from their windows and began gathering in front of the house. One of them could be seen making a call on a smartphone. Attorney Brown had already leaked the story anonymously to multiple media outlets. As expected, in less than 10 minutes, several vans bearing television station logos arrived, and cameramen rushed about frantically. It was the beginning of a public, humiliating show. Flanked by investigators, Daniel and Olivia were dragged out of the house. They exposed their disgraceful figures before gathered neighbors and countless flashes of cameras. On their wrists gleamed dull silver handcuffs. The faces of the two, twisted in despair and humiliation, burned into my eyes like the finest work of art. I quietly raised my champagne glass high. On the screen, Sophia raised her glass of cola as well. Together, we toasted in silence. It was a quiet, yet most powerful toast to celebrate the triumph of justice. That night's news was dominated by the story. The husband of a prominent female consultant and his sister-in-law had been arrested for massive asset fraud and insider trading. The victim was Madison, the wife. The broadcast also showed a photograph of me, one provided by Attorney Brown, capturing me with an intelligent and dignified expression. In contrast, the footage of Daniel and Olivia being taken away was replayed again and again. In a single night, they had fallen from dazzling success stories to the most infamous fools in the neighborhood. I watched the news from the hotel bed as though it were someone else's affair. The revenge was complete. No, my part in executing it was complete. All that remained was to wait for the judicial system to deliver its final judgment upon them. After that storm-like night had passed, the world welcomed the morning unchanged. Yet the world surrounding me had certainly and dramatically transformed. Bathed in the morning sunlight streaming through the suite window, I felt the beginning of a new life. When I turned on the television, every channel was reporting extensively on the previous night's incident. Daniel and Olivia were no longer merely individuals with names, but symbols, suspects, exposed to society's prying eyes. The false paradise they had tried to build had turned into a pile of rubble in just one night. The following weeks passed in a blur of coordination with Attorney Brown and interviews from the relevant authorities. Yet my heart remained strangely calm. Thanks to the perfect evidence and Attorney Brown's remarkable skill, everything proceeded exactly as I had scripted. The trial drew immense public attention. Standing in court, Daniel and Olivia were so exhausted that they no longer bore any trace of their former selves. They repeatedly shifted blame onto one another, engaging in disgraceful exchanges of responsibility. Their appearances might have stirred pity, but my heart did not waver. Considering what they had done to me, it was only a just punishment. The verdict was handed down 6 months after the incident. Fraud, forgery of private documents, insider trading, and egregious tax evasion. With multiple charges compounded, Daniel was sentenced to 10 years in prison, and Olivia was sentenced to 7. I quietly watched the news on television. And all the assets that had been stolen from me and unlawfully transferred were returned in full, with a substantial amount added in the form of compensation. In the legal sense, the battle ended in my complete victory. After the fight was over, the first thing I did was sell the house I had lived in for so many years. There was no reason to remain in a place so deeply stained with memories of betrayal. With the proceeds from the sale and the assets I had recovered, I fulfilled my long-held dream of establishing my own consulting company. Its name was Reborn Consulting. There could be no more fitting name for the beginning of my new life. After graduating from university, Sophia also joined my company. Her youthful sensibilities and IT skills combined with my experience, and the company grew at an astonishing pace right from its founding. We immersed ourselves in work, as if to sweep away the nightmares of the past. Exactly 2 years had passed since that cursed birthday. I was celebrating my 50th birthday with a modest party in the new office we had set up. The open office, overlooking the cityscape of New York, was filled with the smiles and energy of my trusted staff. Sophia, looking a little shy, carried in the birthday cake. "Happy birthday, Mom." Surrounded by the warm applause and singing of the staff, I gently blew out the candles. A peaceful, happy moment I could never have imagined 2 years earlier. What I had lost was great, but what I had gained was far more valuable. While cleaning up after the party, the receptionist told me that a letter had arrived addressed to me. When I saw the sender's name, I gasped for a moment. It was the first letter I had ever received from Olivia, who was serving her sentence in prison. When I was alone, I broke the seal with trembling hands. On the stationery, in her familiar yet now feeble handwriting, were pages filled with words of apology. "Dear Madison, I'm sorry. I know that the sins I committed can never be forgiven. I gave in to Daniel's persuasive words and to my own desires, and I betrayed you. Every day in my cell, I remember your kind face and drown in tears of regret. I have cut off all contact with Daniel. Through the days of trial where we hurled insults at each other, I realized that he never loved me. What he loved was the sense of superiority he felt from using me to control you. And I too have finally realized, only after losing everything, that I never truly loved him either. I was simply blinded by the luxurious life he offered me. I know I have no right to say this, but someday, when I have paid for my sins, I hope for just one chance to speak with you again." When I finished reading the letter, I quietly folded it in two. No tears came. If asked whether I could forgive her, I could not nod immediately. Yet, strangely, the blazing fire of hatred that once consumed me no longer existed in my heart. Perhaps it was proof that for the past 2 years, I had lived desperately, facing forward. To forgive her? Or not? Such simple words could never neatly contain these complicated emotions. But the fact remained. I no longer hated her. To go on hating would be the same as remaining imprisoned by the past. There was no longer a place for them in my life. I neither tore up nor discarded that letter. I simply placed it quietly in the back of my desk drawer. It was like a receipt, signifying that my long and painful battle had truly come to an end. The settlement of the past was complete. The city lights spreading outside my window shone even brighter than they had 2 years ago when I gazed at them from that hotel room. Sophia came to my side and gently placed her hand on my shoulder. "Mom, are you okay?" I smiled back at her. "Yes, I'm fine. Completely fine now." For a while, we gazed silently at the night view together. Then I spoke to Sophia. "You know, Sophia, don't you think life is a bit like creating the perfect business plan? You cut off unnecessary assets without mercy, manage unforeseen risks thoroughly, and secure the greatest profit. Family betrayal? No, that was the most difficult and the most successful corporate restructuring project of my life. I will never look back at the past again. Our future will stretch on, bright and vast, like this glittering night view before us.